Still continuing on our AI-powered adaptive card web part. So when we last saw our heroes, right, we talked about we're building this timeline where we're going to show you how to create an adaptive card web part, property pane, AI-powered layout, all that stuff. We are here today. We're just talking about the base web part itself. And let's just jump right into a demo. Yep, there you go. All right, so this is the web part that we are building together. And we called it the Enhanced Web Part Builder. Why did we call it that? Well, you just saw Michael. Michael is able to build SPFx web parts. That's great. That's fantastic. However, what if you don't have the skills to do that? What if you want to build the types of web parts that Michael just showed, joke of the day, quote of the day, things like that, that are getting data and they're rendering that data, but you don't want to write code. And this is where our adaptive card web part comes in. And so what we can do here is we can actually go in and we can paste some templates. So for example, here's a template for my vacation days that I could use. And it could go pick that up from a Dataverse, it could pick that up from a list, or it could call an API behind the scenes. Here's another one where we show the list of holidays. This is the American holidays, but again, this is something that HR could build into their website, and they could have this adaptive card display there. Now, we could also have, for example, help desk create a form-based application that uses adaptive cards, just JSON, and it would actually render this and would allow me to actually pick fields, fill information, and then submit. Let's continue quickly. I could even go and display details of an incident, and we'll show you later in future sessions how we can connect web parts together. So imagine that this could actually be the details on a list of incidents, and this person saying that their coffee cup holder on their computer doesn't work anymore, and they don't understand why. All right, but I could also use the same data source to go get a different view of that same data to get the list of incidents. Now, it's very cool, but there's another thing that we can do with adaptive card web parts, or adaptive cards. One, which is to separate the presentation. So here's a list of top tips for productivity. And maybe we would actually have the data either coming from a different list here, or it would be, in this case, it's all the localization for the data. And so this is a great way to present the information. All right, one last example here of building applications using just adaptive cards. Here's an example here where what we've focused on is actually localizing all the text, and the data that we're going to display is actually all the localized text that shows up. Now, there's another cool thing that's available with our adaptive cards. I'll just, I'll paste different data here. And I want to show you that the data that I've created here basically says I have a title, I have a summary, I have a username, and a site. And it could be any other type of data. This is just the data I chose to show here. And if I replace the template here with something very simple, where I basically say the adaptive card has a text block that shows the title, and then there is a variable here called title from the data. And I have the same thing here for my summary right here. And if I scroll a little bit lower down, I have a variable here for my user. Oops, there you go. The user. Obviously, I'm not as good as David when it comes to using the fancy editing tools. But there's something very cool that I can do here. So let me change the template here to just show the user without any text in front of it. Now, adaptive cards support something called adaptive expressions. They're actually functions that I can call within my adaptive card. So I can do some logic and I can do some cool things. So an example here is I'll actually just use the reverse function, which is a built-in function, and I'll reverse the name of the user. It renders Reinreb Hugo, which is, by the way, my evil twin, in case you haven't met him. I can also use multiple functions together. So for example, here I can say the title case of the reverse of the user variable renders it in title case. And one last example here, I can just say make everything uppercase. Now, something that I know my colleagues with the PnP search web part have been looking for a while is the ability to actually create, not just leverage, and just to give you an example here, these are all the functions that are available out of the box with adaptive expressions. I know I'm scrolling really fast. That's kind of the point. There's lots of functions available that you can use, pre-built functions in adaptive expressions. But the challenge is, what if I wanted to create custom functions? And so, for example, here, I will create a custom function called shout. And all that shout does is it actually makes my text in uppercase and adds all sorts of exclamation marks at the end. Now, as we expand through the code over the next several sessions, we'll show you how we'll allow people who are building and extending this web part to be able to actually create their own custom functions. But this is really important for our future extensibility to be able to leverage that. All right, now let's go back to our slides because I got 5 minutes left. All right, so let's dig into the code. The first thing that we do with our code here is it's always a good user experience to tell our users, hey, you haven't entered the right information. Please don't show a blank web part when users haven't put information. Guide them. In this case, we'll tell them to configure the web part. And the way we use that is we use the PnP Reusable Controls to actually go get the information or go get the placeholder component, and the placeholder control is right here. I've provided the link below, but it tells you in the page how to use this. I'm going to use this version right here, which gives me a button, and it even hides the button to configure if the page is not in edit mode. Now, this code will look very familiar because that's exactly what I do in my code here. Now, if you look at how I render the code here or the page, I basically say if there is a template that's been provided, which is the minimum thing I need to display an adaptive card, then I show the adaptive card. But if I don't have an adaptive card, I just call the placeholder. And you'll notice here that I took the time to localize all the text because, again, we're trying to build a web part here that will be extensible and used by everybody. So we want to make sure that from the start, we build things that are localizable. I have a configure button, which basically opens the property pane of the web part when you click on it. And I here have the code that determines whether I'm currently in display mode, edit, or read. And if it's in read mode, I just don't show the button to configure, which looks like this. This is in edit mode, and this is in read mode or preview mode. So it hides the button. All right, so let's jump ahead a little bit. Give me 1 second. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to jump ahead to what we're going to be doing next on our next session. So again, you are here, right? We're looking at adaptive card web part. Our next session, we're going to show you how to create a custom property pane, because this is the out of the box property pane that I got. You just saw that. But what we want to do in our near future is to do something like this, where when you go into the advanced property pane, you'll be able to actually use a multi-pane property pane, which will take over most of the screen. And what it will have a section for an AI assistant to chat with you and help you build the adaptive card. Again, so you don't have to have coding skills. You can actually just literally describe what you're trying to build, or even upload a picture. We'll even have a little collapsible section to hide and show the chat agent if it annoys you. We'll have a Monaco editor, like Visual Studio Code, built into the web part, which will allow you to edit the code. And we'll have a few options here, like to enable different settings and things like that. And then finally, we'll give you a preview of what your adaptive card will show you. And we'll have all sorts of fancy toggles like only show me the code, only show me the preview, show the code, show the preview, or show me both, which is what we have now. So that's going to be our next session. We're going to build that fancy property pane. For more information, you can go read up on adaptive expressions, start looking at what kind of expressions you'd like to build, because we'll be able to add those. Of course, you can continue learning about adaptive cards by going to adaptivecards.io, and don't miss out on the PnP Reusable Controls to make your web parts look professional. That's all the time I have for today.